Hello, everybody. This is Miss Rachel and Miss Heather from the Hagerstown Public Library, and we're here with our fourth virtual
Fourth one?
yeah,
Yep.
virtual mythology class. So the first 2 weeks we did Greek mythology. Last week we started Egyptian. This week and next week we're going to work on Egyptian, and then we'll do 2 weeks of Roman, and then we're maybe going to do like a review week or just kind of touch
Bonus
up on
week.
some random things in the last one. So just wanted to say if you haven't signed up for our summer reading program, go ahead and come on in and sign up, or you can sign up on our website. It's a good way for you to keep track of your reading, and you'll get prizes. We've got like a bingo sheet. We've got other virtual programs. At the end of this program, I'll give out a code word, and you can use that to get credit for this program. But you'll need to sign up for summer reading before you do. So I think we'll get started. So thank you for joining us, and I hope you guys enjoy. All right, so last week we talked about, just basically did an introduction to Egyptian mythology. We did an intro on the main, 10 gods or something like that. And then we talked about basically how, like, Egyptian mythology creation story, so to speak. And then did some info on some pyramids and mummies and stuff. Oh, and our sign just fell down. So I'm going to do a quick review on the gods, and then we'll talk. Heather's got a craft and stuff. If you didn't pick up the craft at the, the information on the craft for the front steps, you'll need, just flour, salt, and water? Yep. So if you guys have flour, salt, and water, you can make the craft with us. If not, you can just watch and maybe take notes and make it another time. But I'm going to go ahead and get started. I've got some pictures, so I'll try to show them to you. So first we have Ra, the sun, or the god of the sun. Ra was the first pharaoh of the world back in the days when gods inhabited Egypt. Each day, Ra's golden sun ship would sail across the sky, and each night it would travel through the underground world of the Duat, sailing the river of darkness and fighting off monsters. The Egyptians celebrated each sunrise when Ra emerged victorious again and caused a new day to begin. After many centuries, Ra became old and senile and retreated into the heavens, giving up his throne to Osiris. And then next we have, I should probably show you a picture. So that's a picture of Ra. Sitting on his throne, I guess, being pharaoh. Okay, now we have Geb and Nut. The god of the earth, Geb was one of the first gods to appear from the sea of chaos at the beginning of time. He appears as a man made of earth, with rivers, forests, and hills across his entire body. Nut was Geb's wife, the goddess of the sky. Yes, we know she's got a funny name, but she was not the goddess of peanuts. She appeared as a woman with skin like a starry sky, dark blue and covered in constellations. She has often appeared stretching over Geb as the sky stretches over the earth. Although Geb and Nut loved each other very much, Ra had a prophecy that their children would try to overthrow him someday. So Ra did his best to keep them apart. Despite this, Nut managed to have 5 children, and the oldest, Osiris, did indeed take over the throne from Ra. Okay, so here's the picture of Geb and Nut, and if you can see, Geb can't really see very well, but he's got like rivers and stuff flowing over his body, and then you can see Nut like stretching over like the sky. And then next we have Shu. Nut's father, the god of the air, was given the job of keeping Nut and Geb apart. This is why the sky is so far above the earth. The god of the earth stays between them, the god of the wind stays between them, keeping his daughter from visiting her love, the earth. Shu is usually not pictured because he is invisible, like the wind. However, they do have a picture of him on here. And a lot of these gods and goddesses have there are different versions of their pictures. I mean, you can usually, they're usually kind of similar. They have, defining features, but sometimes they'll be pictured differently. It's just part of the culture. Different parts of Egypt had different art styles, I guess. I don't know.
It's kind of like with our Greek, and we'll be discussing Roman. As it traveled, the stories varied a little. Like we discussed last week, Miss Rachel brought up a fact that if our religion was maybe Egyptian mythology, basically. It formed into that. You know, it could be one set story in California and then another set in New York. I mean, they're going to be different, but there may be slight variances because of the way it traveled. And another example was, like I told you last week, that Pharaoh could decide what he liked about a story, what he didn't, and when he celebrated it, he was like, no, I don't like it. So that's how the variances kind of happen.
Yeah. It's with a lot of mythology, you'll find different variations of the story, although most of them have very similar, like the, I don't know, like the gist of the story is the same, but sometimes they'll be a little bit different. And like you'll even get that with like Cinderella stories. Like, for example, I read a Cinderella story the other day in one of my programs, and it's different than like the Disney version. So they're just different versions of so many different
Different
stories.
versions, different names. Like we encountered, remember with the Greek, Set and Seth, or actually this is Egyptian, Set and Seth are the same.
Yeah, but they like one has an H after it. So
Yep.
okay, so now we're talking about Osiris, the first son of Geb and Nut. Osiris was a wise and good pharaoh. And our sign's falling again.
It's okay.
Osiris was a wise and good pharaoh when he took over the world from Ra. Osiris taught man about farming and created the first cities of Egypt. Unfortunately, Osiris's brother Set was jealous of him. Set tricked him into laying down in a golden coffin, then sealed the coffin and cut it into pieces. Set scattered the pieces all over Egypt, and Osiris's wife Isis spent years searching for them. Eventually, Isis put her husband back together, binding him in cloth to make the first mummy. But Osiris only came partially back to life. After that, he was the god of the underworld, sitting in judgment over the souls of the dead. He appears as a king with blue skin and white robes. So I don't know if you can see the top very well, but his skin almost looks kind of greenish in this picture.
He's kind of like what we discussed last week. All kids like your ages are pretty familiar with zombies, so he's like the first zombie, if you think about it.
Yeah, came back from the dead.
He wasn't all the way there, but he was kind of there.
Okay, then we have Isis. Osiris's wife was the goddess of magic and clever and ambitious women. She tricked Ra into retiring by poisoning him with a magic snake, then encouraging the old sun god to reveal his secret name so Isis could cure him. Once Isis knew Ra's secret name, she could force him to do just about anything. She encouraged him to retreat into the sky, opening the throne for Osiris. Isis was the patron of magicians and loved her husband very much. She encouraged their son Horus to take vengeance on the evil Set who had killed Osiris. Isis is often pictured as a beautiful woman with multicolored wings. So you can see Isis there. You'll hear in a lot of these stories, especially like not just Egyptian mythology, but in a lot of mythology overall, they weren't really very nice to each other.
No.
They did mean things, tricked each other, and yeah.
They fought like brother and sister a lot of the time.
Yeah, but then sometimes, like, the one story Set basically chopped his brother into pieces. That's not very nice.
No.
So, a lot of these stories are kind of, I don't know. They weren't very nice people, or gods, I guess.
No.
Okay, now we have Set. The god of the desert, storms, and evil, Set was one mean dude. His color was red, the color of sterile soil and the desert. Set was the strongest of the gods and very tricky. He became pharaoh of Egypt after killing his brother, but was later overthrown by his nephew Horus. After that, Set fled into the desert where he controlled all the evil, harsh lands outside the Nile Valley. Set wasn't all bad, however. In the old days, he sailed on Ra's boat and helped defend the sun god from the armies of the chaos serpent Apep. Set is usually pictured with red skin and the head of an unknown animal demon, part dog, part anteater, all ugly. So you can see him down here in the bottom with his weird head. Okay, now we have Nephthys, the river goddess, wife of Set and sister of Isis. Nephthys didn't like her husband very much because after he killed Osiris, Nephthys helped Isis collect his pieces and bind them together. She was a kind and gentle goddess and mother of Anubis, the god of funeral rites. So here's Nephthys up here in the top. And now we have Horus. Called the Avenger, Horus was the son of Isis and Osiris. When he grew to manhood, he challenged Set and eventually defeated him, becoming the new pharaoh of Egypt. Afterwards, all mortal pharaohs considered themselves to be descendants of Horus. Horus's symbol was the falcon, and he is often pictured as a man with a falcon's head. So you can see him there with bird head. Next we have Bast. Cats were extremely popular in Egypt because they could kill snakes, scorpions, and other nasty creatures. Bast, the goddess of cats, was just as popular. Bast was a protective goddess, and people would wear amulets with her likeness for good luck, especially during the bad luck demon days at the end of each year. In cat form, Bast is often pictured with a knife fighting the chaos serpent Apep. She was Ra's faithful cat. So a lot of times, the Egyptians' ways of like honoring a god or something, they would have like an amulet, or maybe they would wear like a headdress or something with the picture on it, or they would weave the pictures into blankets or that kind of thing.
Yeah, and then like, you know, in their houses they would have like just a miniature size statue, because obviously you can't have a giant sphinx in your room.
Yeah. Okay, so then we have Sobek. The god of crocodiles was both respected and feared. Crocodiles were strong creatures. In ancient Egypt, an entire city was named after them. Crocodilopolis. I think that's how that's pronounced. Close enough. And Sobek had a temple with a lake full of crocodiles. However, crocodiles were fearsome predators, and many Egyptians were killed each year if they got too near the river. Sobek was pictured as a crocodile-headed man. His sweat was said to have created the rivers of the world. Gross. So you can see there's not a very clear picture of him up there, but it's like he's carved into stone. Okay, then we have Serket, the goddess of scorpions, was both good and bad. She could send scorpions after her enemies, and a single scorpion bite could kill you. On the other hand, you could pray to Serket for protection from poison, and sometimes she was seen as guardian of children. She was pictured as a woman with a giant scorpion for a crown. How do you like that on your head? So you can move my finger there. So you can see her there. And then we have Anubis. Anubis, the god of funerals, was one of the most important gods because he helped prepare the soul for the afterlife and escorted the dead to the hall of judgment. The Egyptians noticed jackals hanging around their graveyards, so they decided jackals must be Anubis' sacred animal. Priests even wore jackal masks when they made the pharaoh's body into a mummy. Anubis helped Isis make Osiris into the first mummy. Anubis is usually pictured as a man with a jackal's head leading a departed spirit through the Duat. You can see Anubis down here on the bottom. I think we just, two more? Oh, a couple more.
Couple more. I can read this if you like.
You want to do these? Okay.
Yeah. 1 minute. I have gunk on my hands. I'm doing a project for you guys. So
Yeah.
Hold tight.
Just getting the graft ready.
Okay, so next we have Bes. He's one of my favorite little guys. So Bes is a god of dwarves, protector of households, mothers, and children. One of the ugliest and most popular gods in ancient Egypt. Bes had the power to scare off evil spirits. He often appeared on amulets, like we were talking about, little figures, and in sculpture as a hairy little man with a lion-like mane and a pug nose. Quite an interesting character. Egyptians believed that dwarves and other people who were born different were inherently magic. Bes was considered extremely good luck. He watched over the common man, children, women in childbirth, and anyone else who needed protection from evil. So this is Bes.
The weird little dwarf guy.
Short, squatty little guy. But he's adorable, I think. Okay. Next we have Khonsu. Khonsu, the god of the moon, loves to gamble. In fact, he once lost 5 days of moonlight to the sky goddess Nut. Remember, she's the one that's arching over her husband Geb. Nut in the game of Senet, which allowed Nut to give birth to her 5 children. Sometimes Khonsu is depicted as a hawk-headed god, but more often he looks like a young man with a side lock of hair, like an Egyptian used. His favorite color was silver. See him right there? And he's got like this lock. So that was really popular with the actual young Egyptian pharaohs and princes. That was quite the style. You could have a shorter haircut and then just had one little string of hair. And it was kind of like a status symbol basically then. The next one we have is Nikbet. Nikbet is the goddess of vultures, one of the oldest goddesses of Egypt. Nekhbet was a patron of the pharaoh and is often pictured with her wings spread over the king. Her shrine was in Nekheb, the city of the dead, where she oversaw the oldest oracle in Egypt. Like all vultures, she preyed on the dead and the dying. So if you see her hovering over you, you gotta start dancing. Make sure she knows you're alive because she's gonna prey on you if you don't, and that's not a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay, so hey, I'm getting used to this. This is what she looked like. Okay, she was pretty, but she could be dangerous. And next we have two more. Next we have Babi. He was our little baboon crazy man. Unlike the wise baboons of Thoth, Babi was the god of wild baboons, especially alpha males. He was aggressive and bloodthirsty and was given the job of eating the wicked dead in the underworld. He especially loved entrails. Yum. Babi is definitely not a primate you want to fight. So in real life, Babi and the baboons are actually very aggressive, so that's kind of like the perfect god for them and symbolism for baboons. Tauret is a goddess of hippos. While the Egyptians were scared of male hippos, they saw the female hippo goddess Tauret as a gentle protector. She looked after pregnant women especially and is often depicted with a swollen belly, kind of like she's pregnant. Like Bess, she could scare off evils. In fact, in many stories, Tauret is the girlfriend of Bess. What a cute couple.
Show them the picture.
Yeah, so yes, she has a picture. I'm so sorry, guys. So there she is in all of her glory. Tauret.
All right, so next you're going to do the cartouche?
Yes, next we're going to do our craft. And if you do not have it, that's okay. We have our packets, and they're just like mine. On the red card out front, they'll be there out all week, and if we have any requests, I can put them out additionally as well. It's really something simple, and I'm going to read this for you real quick, and then I'll show you what I was kind of doing over here while she was reading the rest of the guides. Let's go. So our craft this week is called Design Your Own Cartouche. I did this in public school at Northeastern in 6th grade. We studied world geography and ancient history, and Egyptian was a big thing because it is a big part of ancient civilization that has had a huge influence on our modern day cultures around the world. We did what's called a salt flour dough, and you make your own cartouche. So I'm going to read you what a cartouche is, okay? So, what is a cartouche? In ancient Egypt, kings and sometimes others encircled their name, hieroglyphs. So like these right here are hieroglyphics. Yeah, these were how they wrote. They didn't have, the letters that we have now that kind of derive from like Greek and Roman alphabet. They had symbols, and not every letter we have in today's modern alphabet for the Americans, 26 letters, some symbols would match up to be a couple different vowels or sounds, and one symbol is how you would write. So my name is 7 letters, but you only get 1, 2, 3, 4 symbols for my whole name. And the same thing for Miss Rachel. It's not enough letters to make our American names. Mm-hmm. So that's how they would do the lettering. While we may find it presents rarely used to enclose the name of non-kings, for the most part, the cartouche's presence identifies the name it encloses as the king of Egypt. A cartouche is an oval ring symbolized, symbolized everything that the sun encircled and is thus the indication of the king's rule of the cosmos. Later in the Demotic script, the cartouche was reduced to a pair of parentheses and a vertical line. So it went from like something really big to just like a really tiny nameplate, basically. And that we talked about last week. It's like a royal nameplate. Okay? The term cartouche is relatively modern, one coined by the soldier of Napoleon's expedition. So Napoleon was a soldier, and he was trying to take over the world, basically. He had a little man complex. Expedition in Egypt, who saw the sign of the likenesses of the cartouches or cartridges, or the cartouche, used in their own guns. The cartouche, known in ancient Egypt as a shinu, is derived from Egyptian verb shini, which means to encircle. So you're circling around your name and your symbol and your status, basically. It is very similar to the shin sign, a more circular form. In fact, the earliest use of the cartouche in which the king's name was written were circular and identical to that sign. So in order to understand the cartouche, we must know something of the shin sign. However, this sign is perhaps most commonly associated with the avian forms of the falcon god Horus. So we've discussed Horus already and the various vulture goddesses. Mm-hmm. These divine birds are frequently depicted holding the Shin in their claws, hovering above the king, guarding him beneath their outstretched wings. The Shin signs represented these with avian deities, so like bird, avian, Ari is bird. Another word for bird, just a fancy word. Deities may be regarded as symbols of eternity and therefore life, but it is possible that they would signal the signs also to carry a connotation of protection, and this double significance would certainly seem to be present in many of the small decorative items and amulets, and indeed the larger royal objects which are adorned with this sign. So those were very, very important and very popular with your signage. While the earliest use of a cartouche seems to have been identical form to the Shin sign, early Egyptian history, the form of the Shin sign was lengthened in order to hold the increased number of hieroglyphs, resulting for longer royal names and fuller orthography. In this way, the Shin continued to be used as a sign with its own meaning, while the cartouche, or Shinyu, became the standard holder of the royal name. Occasionally, one may find the name of a god or goddess in a cartouche. This was especially the case for Osiris, Onofris, and Isis in the temple inscriptions of the Greco-Roman period. So Egypt was kind of invaded and in and out for a few years. Greeks would come in, the Romans would come in, and they would get along, and then there would be big fights.
Yeah.
So there's that. So I'm gonna kind of read off what you're gonna need in case you do not have it. So if you have a pencil and pen and you don't have our handy dandy packet, I will read this up for you. I halved the recipe just because it's just for me and Rachel. If you want to do, and I did something smaller so it's a little bit more manageable so I can hold it up for you. It is 2 cups of flour, so just regular baking flour. It doesn't matter if it's all-purpose, self-rising, just flour. 1 cup of salt, so I have salt. Okay. A bowl, just your mixing bowl, just a regular mixing bowl. You can even just use, a cereal bowl if you have it, or whatever. Then you need 3/4 cup of water, so a measuring cup with your water makes it a little easier. A flat surface to roll the dough on. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you the cartouche dough. So I've got a really easy, flappable, portable cutting board. So I just laid my cartouche on that. There we go. Here we are. So there's that, and then it calls for a rolling pin. I just use my hands really quickly. You don't have to use one. This is just what my recipe I have at home calls for, especially if you want to do something bigger, then you will need your rolling pin.
Mm-hmm.
And you need just some kind of object, kind of pointy object, like we have these, what are these? Chopsticks.
Chopsticks.
We had these chopsticks from the other day, so you can use that for an engravement. You can use a plastic knife. You could use the end of an unsharpened pencil. You can use a sharpened pencil, anything that will kind of engrave and kind of cut in but not cut through all the way. So you can do your own hieroglyphics name in there. Another thing you can also do was we did a little bit of this when I did this a long time ago. I'm not going to say how old I was, but a long time ago. You can decorate them. You can paint them. You could do glue. You could add glitter. Whatever you want to do, you can decorate it as long as you think it's going to stay on there. You're good to go. Also, you will need a computer or someone's phone if you don't have one. You need to go to lingojam.com and it'll have a place and you can look up hieroglyphic, or you can just Google hieroglyphic Egyptian translator, and LingoJam should come up. If you have a problem, just let us know, and one of us will be able to help you. It's not hard. And what you do is it'll have a space on the website where you can type in your name or whatever you want to put on your cartouche, and it'll come up with the design of the hieroglyph that you need. Like I said, with our names, not every letter is there, so it has multiple letters for one sign, so just be in mind of that. Also, you need an oven, or you could dry it out naturally, but an oven actually helps it be more solid and into something you can keep forever. You need an oven, and it needs to be preheated to 350 degrees with the help of an adult, if possible. Okay, so what we're going to do is I've already mixed everything together, so the salt, your flour, your water, and I mixed it up real quick and then you need to put flour on your cutting sheet, because if not, the dough that you've made, the salt flour dough, will stick to it and it will come off in pieces. So it's kind of like when you make cookie dough or a pie crust, you need to have some flour down so it can come up off of the cutting board. So then you're going to do that, and then you make an oval shape, because that's how they were. They were like this. They were oval shaped, and I'll show you mine. I'll have a mess to clean up, but that's okay.
I was saying we could probably tilt the laptop.
The
That might
laptop
work.
tilt would be amazing.
So if you can kind of see,
Yep.
it's kind of an oval shape. She hasn't like carved anything into it yet. But yeah, and if you guys do them and want to post pictures, that would be
Absolutely.
awesome. And also we can try to put the Lingo Jam website. That's the word, website.
The link to it. Link it.
Yes, the link in the comments when this is over if you guys can't find it.
Yeah, because it's a really cool resource. Like, some of it, he said, and he's still working on it, but that was the best resource I found, other than having to like read a whole packet's worth of how to do your sounds and everything else. Like I said, I did this way back when I was real young, and our teacher already had everything printed up and written out for us. So that's the easiest resource I can have for you. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a little bit of my carving, and I'm gonna grab my poster that kind of fell, and I'm gonna do my name real quick. So my name looks like this. So that's the H and then the rest of the letters. So I'm gonna do that real quickly, and then I'll show you what I'm done. All right.
So hieroglyphics, they can be kind of tricky to do because, as you can see, some of them are just like, whoops, just like this basic thing. I think I could probably do that, but then this one's a bird. That's a little more complicated. So I don't know.
That was really hard. The bird was very hard, and then there's a lion. It kind of looks like a lion or the Sphinx. That's really hard. And then we have a bird. Miss Heather's going to do the best she can with the bird.
Yeah.
Some things are easy. Like Miss Rachel's name was pretty easy. A couple ovals, one bird, and then the lion.
Yeah, I think it's really cool that people would do this, and they would basically write with pictures.
Yeah. They were writing with pictures, and they would literally have a hammer and chisel and just do it like that along the stone walls or the cartouches or however they wanted to do it. And then we have that. Now bear with Miss Heather, because this isn't going to be the best. My dough's not the greatest today. But if you follow the recipe, it'll be perfect.
Yeah.
I promise. This was something quick that I've done. Okay, and then we have an oval. We can do that.
We can do ovals.
Ovals are easy. Okay, you may not be able to tell very well, but the chopstick works. And if you don't have a chopstick, even a bamboo skewer, your plastic knife will work, even a pencil. It works. So I'm gonna have Miss Rachel kind of tilt this down and show you what it'll kind of look like.
Yeah, I don't know. You can really see it with the glare.
Okay, so you
A
can
little
definitely
bit.
see the first letter. That's the quote-unquote H for Miss Heather, and then the rest. There we go.
Yeah.
That is the best I can do right now. My dough dried out just a little, but
And if you guys paint them, it'll be even easier
Yep.
to
make out.
make out. Yeah. So
Now you will need to paint them after they are out of the oven, and they have to dry for 20 to 30 minutes. Now you may, if you make a bigger cartouche and it's thick, you may have to adjust your time for 30 minutes to 45 minutes to an hour. Just have an adult check it and make sure it's not really soft, and then take it out of your oven with an adult, please. I don't want you guys burnt. Take it out of the oven, let it cool down for 20 to 40 minutes, depending on how long and how big your cartouche is. And then you can paint it, decorate it however you want. And then once you get that done, send pictures to us, and we'll be so excited to see
yeah,
them.
we want to see them.
Yes. So, we are going to move on for that. So that's how you make your cartouche. Quick, easy, simple. Even little siblings can make them. I have my little guy who's 2. He can make them with me, and we do his fingerprints. He's pretty good at that. So we are going to discuss another story. Like Miss Rachel said, the Egyptians were very, very big into the afterlife. Just like the Greeks had specific things they celebrated and loved, but the Egyptians were very, very keen on the afterlife. So I'm going to read this story for you real quickly. It's called The Land of the Dead. So this is how your journey was to the underworld. So let's get started. The one visit to the Duat, of which a record remains, was paid by Osiris, the wonderful child magician who read the sealed letter, and his father Setha, the son of Pharaoh Ramses the Great. They stood one day in the window of a palace at Thebes. So Thebes is like one of the bigger cities other than Cairo in Egypt. It was a central city as well. They stood one day in the window of the palace of Thebes watching two funerals on their way to the west. The first of that was a big rich man. His mummy was enclosed in a wooden case and laid with gold. Those were called, if you remember, those are called sarcophagus. Sarcophaguses. Sorry, instead I can't talk today. Troops and servants and mourners carried him to burial and bore gifts for the tomb, while many priests walked in front and behind chanting hymns to the gods and reciting the great names and words of power which he would need to the journey through Duat. So Duat is like the underworld and the way to get to there. The second funeral was for a poor laborer. His two sons carried a simple wooden case. His widow and his daughter-in-law were the only mourners. So we discussed last week, if you remember, we have discussed that there are different types of funerals and funeral rites for people. So the poor would just get something simple like that. You would just have the closest relatives, a simple mummification, which just included, just basically wrapping and taking the organs out. They wouldn't really do too much. Now, if you had like a pharaoh king, like someone that was in higher, richer status, then they had a whole procession of people and they would chant for them. They would put things in the tomb that they would need for the afterlife. So that's just...
It's like a big show.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a big difference between the haves and have-nots for people. Well, said Setna, watching the two funerals going down to where the boats were, waiting to carry them across the Nile, I hope that my fate will be that of a rich noble and not of a poor laborer. On the contrary, said Osiris, I pray that the poor man's fate may be yours and not that of the rich man. Setna was much hurt by his son's words, but Osiris tried to explain them, saying, whatever you may have seen here matters little compared to with what will chance you to in judgment, the hall of Osiris. So judgment hall, I'll probably explain in here later, but it's kind of like in Greek mythology, you go and see Hades, basically, and your soul is trapped in the underworld. It's kind of like a talk you have in a meeting with him before he decides where you're going to go. So, let's see. I will provide it to you if you will trust yourself to me. I know the words and power that open all gates. I can release your Ba and mine, our souls, that then can fly to the Duat, the world of the dead, and see all that is happening there. Then you will discover how different are the fates of this rich man who has worked evil during his life, and this poor man has done nothing but good. Setna had learned to believe anything the wonderful child said without surprise, and he now agreed to accompany his son into the Duat, even though he knew that such an expedition would be dangerous, for once there, they might not be able to return. So the prince and the small boy made their way to the sanctuary of the temple of Osiris, where, as members of the royal family, they had the power to go. When Setna had barred the doors, Osiris drew a magic circle around them, and round the statue of Osiris, and round the altar, which a small fire of cedar wood was burning. Then he threw a certain powder into the flame upon the altar. Thrice he threw the powder, and he threw it a ball of fire rose from the altar and floated away. Then he spoke a spell and ended with great name of power, a word at which the whole temple rocked, and the flame on the altar leapt high and sank into the darkness. But the temple of Osiris was not dark. Setna turned to whence the light came, and would have cried out in horror if the silence had not pressed upon him like a weight that had him paralyzed. For standing on either side of the altar, he saw himself and his son, Osiris. Only suddenly he knew that it was not his own body and the boy's, for the two bodies lay in the shadows cast by these two forms. The form of their cause are the devils, so kind of like their doppelgangers in the other world. And above each Ka, clear light of the Ku, served as its own Ka in the dim form of the body form which Ka and Ku were drawn. Then the silence was broken by a whisper soft as a feather falling. yet which seemed to fill the whole temple with sound. Follow me, now, my father, said the voice of Osiris, for the time is short and we must be back before morning if we would live to see the son of Ra. So this one has Ra. It's the same thing, it's just a different variants of names like we talked about. Let's keep going. Rise again over Egypt. Setna turned and saw beside him the Ba, or the soul of the sea Osiris, a great bird with golden feathers, but with the head of his son. I followed, he forced his lips to answer. Then, as the whisper filled the temple, he rose to the golden wings of his own Ba and followed the Ba of sea Osiris. The temple roof seemed to open and let them through, and a moment later they were speeding to the west, swifter than an arrow from Ethiopian's bow. So Ethiopians were known as fierce warriors and very good at archery. Darkness lay over Egypt, but one red gash of sunset shone through the great pass of the mountains in the western desert, the gap of Abydos. Through this they sped into the first region of the night and saw beneath the Mesquite boat in which Ray began his journey into the Duat with the ending of each day. Splendid was the boat, glorious its trappings, and the colors were amethyst and emerald, jasper and turquoise, lazuli, and the deep glow of gold. A company of the gods drew the boat along the ghostly river of death, with golden towing ropes. The portals of the Duat were flung wide, and they entered the first region between the 6 serpents, who were curled on either side. And in the great boat of Ra journeyed the cause of all who had died that day and were on their way to the judgment hall of Osiris. So the boat moved on in its way through regions of night and thick darkness and came to the portal of the second region. Tall were the walls on either side, and upon their tops were the points of spears, so that none might climb over the great wooden doors, turned on pivots. And once again snakes breathing fire and poison guarded them. But all who passed through the boat of Ra spoke the words of power decreed for that portal, and the doors swung open. The second region was the kingdom of Re. The gods and heroes of old who had lived on earth when he was king dwelt there in peace and happiness, guarded by the spirits of the corn who make the wheat and the barley flourish and cause the fruits of the earth to increase. Yet not one of the dead who voyaged the boat of Ra might pause there or set foot on the land. They may just pass into Amenti, the third region of the Duat, where the judgment hall of Osiris stood, waiting to receive them. So the boat came to the next portals, and at the word of power, the great wooden doors screamed open on their pivots, yet not so loudly that they did scream as the man who lay on one of the pivots, turning in his eye as punishment for the evil he done upon earth. So losing a eye or some kind of body part was a big deal because of you were being punished for something you had done in the world in your other life.
Yeah, so if you were, had sinned a lot and were evil and stuff in the earth, then you basically went to the underworld and got punished. If you did good things and,
you were a good person.
Yeah, then you would get to go to, I don't remember what they call it, but it's basically a place where there's, I don't know.
You'd be rewarded in your afterlife. Okay. And to the third region sailed the boat of Re, and here the dead disembarked on the outer court of Judgment Hall of Osiris. So that was like the last stop you had before you could go on to your afterlife, basically. But the boat itself continued on its way through the 9 other regions of the night until the rebirth of Ra came from the mouth of the dragon of the east, who brought the dawn once more upon the earth and the rising of the sun. Yet the sun would not rise unless each night Re fought and defended the dragon Apep. So we talked about Apep. He was kind of like the guardian in a way, and once he beat Apep, then the new day would start, and he would go to the east, and he would sleep. Who seeks to devour him in the 10th region of the night. The Ba of Setna and Osiris did not follow the boat of Re further, but flew over the cause of the newly dead who came one by one to the portal of the hall of Osiris, and one by one were challenged by the doorkeeper. Very important person. Stay, cried the doorkeeper. I will not announce thee unless thou knowest my name. Understander of hearts is thy name, answered each instructed call. Searcher of bodies is thy name. Then to whom should I announce thee? Asked the doorkeeper. Thou shouldest tell my coming to the interpreter of 2 lands. Who is then the interpreter of 2 lands? It is Thoth, and the wise God. So each Ka passed through the doorway into the hall. Thoth was waiting to receive him, saying, "Come with me, yet why hast thou come?" "I have come here to be announced," answered the Ka. "What is thy condition?" "I am pure of sin." "Then to whom shall I announce thee? Shall I announce thee to him whose ceiling is of fire, whose walls are of living serpents, whose pavement is of water?" So this is something they had to do to go back and forth to get to Osiris, the hall of Osiris. "Yes," answered the Ka, "announce me, for he is Osiris." So Ibis headed Thoth, led the Ka to where Osiris sat upon his throne, wrapped in mummy clothes of the dead, wearing the uraeus crown upon his forehead, and holding the scourge and the crook crossed upon his breast. Before him stood a huge balance with 2 scales, and the jackal-head Anubis, god of death, stepped forward to lead the Ka to judgment. So this is basically the king and his second in charge that are going to evaluate you in your heart and how you were in your living life to go on to your afterlife, and in terms of whether you were good or bad to people and anything else in your life. But before the weighing of the heart, each dead man's Ka spoke in his own defense, saying, "I am pure, I am pure, I am pure, I am pure. My purity is that of Benu bird, the bright phoenix whose nest is upon the stone persea tree, the obelisk at Heliopolis. Behold me, I have come to you without sin, without guilt, without evil, without a witness against me, without one against whom I have taken action. I live on truth, and I eat of truth. I have done that which men said, and which gods are content. I have satisfied each god with which he desires. I have given bread to the hungry, water to the thirsty, clothing to the naked, and a boat to him who could not cross the river. I provided offerings to the gods and offerings to the dead. So preserve me from Apep, the eater of souls. So protect me, Lord of a Tef crown, Lord of breath, Greek god Osiris." Then came the moment which the evildoer feared, but the good man welcomed with joy. So if you were bad, you know what was going to happen, and even if you lied, they knew. And you would be at ease if you knew you were a good person, and they weighed your heart, and you could go to the afterlife. So Anubis took the heart out of the Ka, which was the double of his earthly body, and placed it in the scale. So if you remember, the Ka is like the double for person. Your body is left on earth, but your spirit goes on to the underworld, and they evaluate from there. So it's not like they're taking a person, like an actual person's. It's their spirit that they were taking. Anubis took the heart of the Ka, that was the double of his earthly body, and placed it on the scale. And in the other scale was set the feather of truth. Heavy was the heart of the evildoer, and it dragged down the scale. So you have your scale, right? And if your heart was heavy, it would go like this. Like that. And if it wasn't, then you would be right there. Okay? So, lower the lower it sank, while Thoth marked the angle of the beam until the scale sank so low that the emmet of the devourer of hearts could catch the sinner's heart in his jaws and bear it away. Then the evildoer was driven forth into the thick darkness of the Duat to dwell with Apep, the terrible, in the pits of fire. But with the good man, the feather of truth sank down, and his heart rose up. Thoth cried aloud to Osiris and the gods, "True and accurate are the words the man has spoken." So I was wrong. So the feather, they would go the other way. And the Apep would not get you. But with the good man, the feather sank down, and his heart rose up. The Thoth cried aloud, "True and accurate are the words he has spoken." He has not sinned, but he has not done evil towards us. Let not the eater up of souls have power over him. Grant the eternal bread of Osiris to be given to him, and a place in the fields of peace for the followers of Horus. Then Horus took the dead man by the hand and led him before Osiris, saying, "I have come to thee, O Nefer Cyrus, bringing with me this new Osiris." His heart was true in coming forth from the balance. He was not sinned against any god or any goddess. Thoth weighed his heart and found it true and righteous. Granted that there may be given to him the bread of beer of Osiris. Maybe he, like the followers of Horus. Then Osiris inclined his head, and the dead man passed rejoicing into the fields of peace there to dwell, taking joy in all things he had loved and his best in his life, and a rich land of plenty, until Osiris returned to the earth, taking with him all those who had provided worthy to live as ever his subjects. All these things and more of base of Ba of sea Osiris showed that Ba of his father Setna, and at length he had said, "Now you know why I wished your fate to be that of the poor man and not the rich man. For the rich man he in whose eyes pivot the third door was turning, but the poor man dwells forever in the fields of peace, clad in fine robes and owning all the offerings which accompanied the evil rich man to his tomb." Then the two Ba spread their golden wings and flew back through the night to Thebes. There they re-entered their bodies which had been guarding at the temple of Cyrus, and were able to return to their place as ordinary living father and son, and in time to see the sun rise beyond the eastern desert and turn the cliffs of western Thebes to pink and purple and gold as the new day dawned over Egypt. So that is a story about the land of the dead. If you have any more questions, you can ask us. Totally talk to us about it. I will. What would you like to do?
Looks like we got about 15 minutes left. So what do you think?
I can explain how they would do the body for mummification.
Okay.
I can do that. So we had talked last week and a little bit of today about how mummification was. So basically, when you died, they would come and get your body, or you would take it to whoever was in the process. There were specific people that were in charge of like going to a funeral home and discussing things with them, and it depended on how much money you had. So like a pharaoh would get the top notch. He would get everything he needed for the afterlife. He would have a very nice sarcophagus. He would have all these rituals and rites spoken over him. Like in that story, there would be him saying things like that. And the body would have to dry for anywhere from 50 to 70 days, depending on what you wanted. They would take your brain out in a very scary way. I'm not going to describe how they do that. So they took your brain out, and then they would put the rest of your organs. Some of your organs would just be tossed away, and then other organs were very important, and they would put them in these jars. So the falcon would have your intestines, the baboon would have your lungs, the human head had the liver, and the jackal would have your stomach. So that's what these were put. Your organs that were very important in the afterlife, they would go in your tomb, and they would go in these jars, and they would also be dried out and kind of mummified in a way. They would wrap them in linen or some kind of fine cloth, depending on how rich you were. And then with the pharaohs, they would have their own pyramids built, and most of the time, the pyramids, they would start building it or their tombs, they would start building them at a really young age. Even though most of them were healthy, you wanted to kind of see and oversee what you wanted in your tomb, what chambers. They would also bury their pets. So like cats, they would mummify the bulls, the prize bulls, any of your prize pets. If the pet passed before you, they would have them mummified and sat in the tomb with you. And then once you passed, you would be in the tomb with that pet or sacred animal. They would do that. Can you think of anything else I'm missing?
Yeah, it was quite the process, as like Heather just explained. It was a big deal. Like if you got something wrong, they thought that, I don't know, because basically their belief was that you would go on and have a second life, so to speak. But if something happened, and maybe, for example, say like they would bury money and stuff with you, but if you didn't have any money to bury, then the person in the next life would be like really poor. They would, I don't know, it was like almost like a curse, so to speak, if you did things wrong. You didn't want to jinx stuff. So
yeah, you would have jewelry, you would have clothing, you would have money, you would have anything you would need in a second life, basically. So like,
I mean, sometimes they'd even bury servants. Like they would kill and bury the servants to go with you, so that you would, especially if you were like a pharaoh, so that you would have people to take care of you. So, I mean, it was intense.
Yeah, there was a lot. And each, like we showed you in our Egyptology book, each pyramid would kind of have different chambers. So you would have the burial chamber. You would have a chamber for your afterlife. And each person's sarcophagus would be different depending on how much money you had. So obviously the pharaohs would have the really high-end sarcophagus. So like, I was talking about King Tut last week. So this is a sarcophagus. Like, this is how they found it. And then this is the burial mass they would put him in. So he had everything you could think of in there.
Right.
Let me find.
This is
So yeah, on that same page, they also had how his chamber in the pyramids looked.
you can see up here. There's like this must be is probably the walkway going in. Here's the treasury, the burial chamber. Then there was like the antechamber, and then the annex. So they could put like other people in there, or sometimes what they would do is they would build it, and then like maybe when your wife died, or if your child died or something, they would put them in there, and then so that you could all be buried together, basically. So you could all live together in the second life.
They would also, like in some chambers they have found in burials, it'd be a fake one just to fool you, because by the end of Egyptian rule, there were already people going into and breaking into the pyramids and the chambers and stealing things. So there would be trap doors. There would be all kinds of different things you would have to run into. And when Egyptology and paleontology started finding and discovering, basically in the Valley of the Kings, these things, there would be a lot of places that would be a dead end because they knew people would eventually be going into there and they weren't supposed to. You're supposed to leave the dead lie.
Yeah, because like people would raid them because they would bury money or food or stuff like that in there, so they'd raid them. But because all of this was such a big deal, they didn't want people going in there, which not really want people going into my grave either. But yeah, so it was just it was a big deal. So they would like booby trap things and stuff. So
They would. Absolutely.
it's kind of cool. Pretty smart, really.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so it looks like we have about 10 minutes left. I think we have time. Yeah, I have a story for you. As I've been looking into the different Egyptian stories and stuff, this one has popped up several different times with several different names. This one is called the Doomed Prince. There was another one called like the Prince with the Three Fates. I think there was even another one, but yeah. So anyway, it's a story I'll just read to you real quick, and then we'll give you the code word, and I think that'll be it.
We'll be out.
All right. So there was once a king of Egypt who had no son for many years. But when he prayed to the gods to give him a son and heir, they listened to him. Now the 7 sacred cows, the Hathors, who knew what would happen to every child in his future, came to greet the babe at his birth and said that his fate would be to die either through a crocodile, a serpent, or a dog. The people who were tending the child went at once and repeated to the king what the Hathors had foretold. His Majesty was terribly grieved at the sad news and became full of trouble. So he gave orders that the child should be shut up in a fine house in the country. Many servants were to wait on him, and every kind of good thing for which he asked was to be his. But he was not allowed to go out among other people, lest one of his 3 dooms should ever take him. Now, when the child was nearly grown up, he was standing on the roof of the house and saw a dog following a person who was walking along the road. He said to the servant who was with him, "What is that which follows the person going along the road?" The servant replied, "That is a dog." The young prince said, "Let one like it be brought to me." The servant told his majesty the king of these things. His majesty said, "Let there be got for him a boar hunting dog to run before him." So the prince became the owner of a beautiful dog. But when the prince was quite grown up, he wearied of his palace prison and sent to his father, saying, "Why should I remain shut up forever? I am doomed to die by one of these 3 deaths. Let God do whatsoever pleases him." His Majesty the king had married another wife, and she did not at all wish the doomed prince to be kept safe from his fate. She hated the prince and urged the king to listen to his message and send him forth to meet whatever was in store for him. So a messenger was sent from the king of the doomed prince, ordering him not only to leave the house, but to leave his native land. The man led the prince out of Egypt to the land that lies upon the northeast and said to him, "Go now wherever thou wilt, thou art thy own master." The prince set out upon his travels, and his faithful boarhound followed after him. At last the prince reached the land of a prince of Mesopotamia. This prince had an only daughter and no son. He had built a high house for her and had placed her window many cubit distance from the ground. Then he sent for all the princes of Syria and said to them, "Whoever can climb to my daughter's window shall marry her." Many royal youths came and tried to scale the wall, but none succeeded. As they were engaged in their daily efforts to reach the princess's window, up rode the doomed prince from Egypt. They welcomed him hospitably, took him into their house, washed him, and gave fodder to his horse. They did every pleasant thing possible for the prince. They lodged him, they shod his feet, they brought him to their table. The princess said to him, "Whence comest thou, thou good youth?" He replied, "I am the son of one of the horsemen of Egypt. My mother died, and my father took another wife, a stepmother. Thereupon she hated me, and I fled before her." Then he fell silent, and the youths kissed him and comforted him and told him about the daughter of the prince of Mesopotamia. They went to climb according to their custom every day, and the doomed prince stood afar off and watched them. The princess's maid stood upon the roof of the tower and watched them also, and noticed the doomed prince. One day the youth joined in their efforts to climb to the window of the princess. He not only outstripped them, but reached her window, and then she drew him into her room. She loved him as soon as she saw him, and kissed and embraced him. Someone ran to congratulate her father and said, "A man has scaled the wall of the tower and reached thy daughter's window." The prince replied, "Which prince is it?" But they answered, "It is the son of a horseman who has run away from Egypt from an angry stepmother." Then the father of the princess grew exceedingly wroth and said, "How can I give my daughter to a runaway from Egypt? Let him go back." So his messengers went forth from his presence and said to the youth, "Go back to the place whence thou earnest." But the princess loved him and would not let him go. She wept and would not be comforted, saying, "By the name of Horus the sun god, if I may not keep him with me, I will neither eat nor drink." The messenger went to the prince and told him that his daughter was on the point of death and would neither eat nor drink. He became even more angry and sent men to slay the youth. But the princess swore a great oath and said, "By the sun, if he is slain, I will die too. I will not pass an hour of life without him." The messenger ran with all speed to her father and told him these things. He ordered the youth to be brought before him, and when the prince saw the youth, he too loved him. He embraced him and kissed him, and said to him, "Behold, thou art unto me even as my own son." The prince replied, "I am the child of a horseman in the land of Egypt. My mother died, and my father took another wife. She hated me, and I ran away from her." The prince gave the doomed prince his daughter as a wife, and gave them a handsome establishment and many servants. All this time the faithful boarhound had remained with the prince. One day the latter said to his wife, "The 7 Hathors doomed me at my birth to die by a crocodile, a serpent, or a dog." Then his wife begged him to take every precaution possible, and she said that the faithful boarhound must die. But her husband would not listen and said, "I will not cause my dog to be killed. How could he do me any harm?" Later, the prince journeyed to Egypt and was out catching birds when a crocodile came out to him. Fortunately, there was with the youth a giant who caught the crocodile and shut it up so that the prince escaped his first doom. The giant did not kill the crocodile, for it was a sacred one. Some time after that, there had been a feast in the youth's house, and he was weary. He lay down on his mat, and sleep overcame him. His wife sat near him watching. A serpent came from a hole to bite the youth, but the wife called the serpents, and they brought drugged wine for the serpent, who drank greedily and lay down overcome by the wine. Then the woman killed it and threw it into the bath. She awoke her husband and told him all that had passed. She said, "Behold, thy God hath given one of thy dooms into my hand." Then the youth gave thank offerings to the gods and worshipped them. Shortly afterwards the youth went to walk some distance from his house, and his dog was following him. The crocodile came up and said to him, "I am thy doom. I will remember thee. I will follow after thee." But the dog brought him to where the giant was, so the doomed prince was saved again. Okay, so that's the end of the story. There was one version I saw that it was called The Unfinished Story. So apparently there may be more to that story. I don't know. It like kind of wrapped up, but
It did, but it didn't. It's like it
Yeah.
leads into like what you want to read into like a movie or another book. It's like you want a part 2, but you don't know.
yeah. So I don't know. You may be able to find more to the story out there.
Right.
But that's the most finished story that I found. Okay, so today I'm going to give the code word before I forget. The code word is Osiris. It's Osiris. Once again, it's Osiris. So thank you guys so much for joining us. We had fun. We'll see you guys next week.
Yep. Bye, guys.